So further down the track, 5 months into UTR being rolled out here in Australia, we thought we'd circle back to Tennis Australia. It's great to have the Director of Pathways and Game Development, Lawrence Robertson, in the studio. He's been a guest many times in a previous role on the phone, but great to have you, Lawrence, in the studio.
Yeah, it's great to be here, Brett. Nice to be here in person. Usually been on the phone in the past, but yeah, nice to see you face to face.
Bit to pull apart. It's a topic, probably the hottest topic, isn't it, right now? You've come from being the CEO of Tennis New South Wales into this role at Tennis Australia, pretty much at the sort of start of this year, if you like.
Yeah.
And UTR has got a lot of commentary. So, we speak to, obviously a full range of people across tennis who are, and I always say this, who are at the real coalface, because I'm not at that absolute coalface at club level, association level. I'm not inside the four walls of Tennis Australia. So we open up the discussion. There's a little thing that I wrote down today, because there can be sometimes negativity that comes out and some criticism, but it's about having a good constructive conversation. And you guys are aware of a lot of the feedback coming in, but I thought this sort of just summed up a lot of the feedback I've got. And I don't know whether it's totally accurate, Lawrence, so I bow to you tonight. So I believe UTR is a great system and see the benefits when used in the right setting, club and localised competition, and the background of a ranking system. The issue is when used as the sole ranking system at the performance level, the levers of UTR in many instances are counter to the core values of player development, competitive sport, and incentivising players to play as much as possible. So that's common. I've spoken to some players, coaches who like it at that younger level, not so much at the performance level. What's the feedback that's been coming into Tennis Australia 5 months down the track predominantly?
So yeah, you're right. I mean, firstly, thanks for giving us the chance to come in and have the conversation this evening. And, it was good to reflect on what Tom, spoke to and mentioned, back in January, I think it was, or February, when we sort of initially rolled out. So we're 5 months in. And we've had sort of really two major tournament swings to look at. So we obviously had our, let's call it our January or summer holidays, and then traditionally the Easter swing. And certainly from what we've observed over the course of Easter, there's still areas where I think we want to be able to dig in a little bit further and understand. We've listened and looked at some of the data. I think the first thing people are saying is, well, numbers are dropping completely. Well, that's not the case. That's certainly not what we're seeing. So the actual number of people who have been competing has remained consistent. The actual number of opportunities for them to compete has actually gone up about 35 to 37%. So as we said, we wanted to liberate the calendar. So now you can play various different competitive opportunities, whereas in the past, we had a ranking system which really served 6,000 players. There were 6,000 ranked players in Australia.
Yep.
We now have, there's over 80,000 people that have a rating profile in Australia. And when we did the review, we wanted to put in place a system that catered for players of all ages and abilities. Now, your reader or your listener is saying, look, there's benefits here, but from a performance perspective, how might we use this? Now, obviously, a rating can generate a ranking. But at the same time, what we are looking at is all the data that we've seen during the course of some of the recent performance events, 12s and 14s, nationals, the recent Mornington events, and we've looked at UTR globally and so on and so forth.
Yep.
There's some consistent patterns that come through. And when you talk about motivation, I can't talk to why a 12 or 13-year-old kid wants to get on the court. But first and foremost, we hope they're getting on court because they love playing the game. That's the first thing you want. And then secondly, you want them to look at ways in which they can progress. We actually believe that the rating can provide that.
So when you say the numbers haven't dropped, so a lot of the feedback I've been getting is probably predominantly around regional country tennis, whether it be here in Victoria or New South Wales, where you've spent a fair bit of time, that they seem really
agitated,
frustrated, very agitated, that once upon a time their great events were getting a huge roll-up, and now there's no incentive for some of the metro kids to come and play these really good regional country tennis events because they don't want their UTR affected. I mean, have you received that feedback more regionally than metro?
Absolutely. And again, let me clarify. The number of players that are playing hasn't dropped, because there's more events, then the entries,
Yep.
the number of entries in some of our events have dropped. And so, we've gone up about 30% in terms of the number of competitive opportunities because, say in the past, the ranking system sort of dictated you go there, you go there, you go there. We're now saying, look, you can choose your competitive experience. Our league participation in certain states are up, so pennant, badge, all those things. We're seeing, a return to some of that club competition, which was a lot of what we heard. But you're right, in terms of regional tennis, we are seeing in some states, and in particular New South Wales, and I'm on a flight tomorrow to spend some time with Darren and Jazz up there because we want to dig into this, right? Because you're right, they're the fabric of our sport in regionals. But, at the same time, I've read that, the place is, there's been nobody going. And we've got, numbers from Easter and, Swan Hill, over 250 entries. The event in Mornington, 210 entries. Mildura had 140 entries. Country Week, as we know, people are playing competitive tennis. Might not be the ranking system, but they're playing competitive tennis. You were up there. There was over 1,000 people playing Warrnambool. And then in Queensland, again, a great tournament state, their numbers were up. Their entries were up during Easter. So the interesting thing is we're hearing some of this stuff. And then you kind of start to look at some of the numbers, and it doesn't necessarily play out across the country. But the regional piece, we're aware that we probably need to go and take a look at that in a bit more detail.
So there's a lot of questions I have here.
Sure.
These are from people who have corresponded with us on our social media channels. So I want to get to as many as we possibly can. But I suppose just before I do that, what you rolled out and what you plan for over a period of time, and there were, 4,000 to 5,000 people surveyed. You come to those conclusions. So now 5 months down the track, what do you think are the things that just need to be tinkered with and changed possibly that are staring at you in the face now that you've seen it rolled out?
Yeah. Look, the first thing I'd say, and Craig says this a lot, the pain of change is greater than the pain of losing, right? So this is probably the single biggest shift in our domestic tennis landscape in well over a decade. So we're 5 months in. So if I can for a second, let's talk to some of the positives. We are seeing at that lower participation level, the feedback is, hey, we like the different formats. The kids are getting more matches. There's more level-based play. There's some positives in that space for sure. Where we're seeing some of the feedback and potentially some of the challenges that have come out of the first 5 months, probably in two areas. Firstly, from a player perspective, we're seeing what we deem behavior, motivation, or incentive. So I'm not going to play a ratings event because I'm worried if I lose, my rating's going to drop. So I can talk a little bit to that in a second. There's no incentive for me to play because I was, earning ranking points, but now I'm not moving quick enough. Or what am I playing? Where should I play? What are the events that I play? So we've got to go and do a better job of educating the coaches, the parents and the players to that point. And I can come back to speak to that. And then on the tournament side of things, in terms of those that are delivering the tournaments, there's probably two or three things that we're hearing. There's the withdrawal issue, right? We're well aware of that. And again, I can touch on that. So we're struggling to understand why a kid or a player would commit to a tournament and then say, hey, they're walking off. Now, we're hearing it's because they want to protect their rating. Brett, I can show you as much data as you. Walking off court ultimately is not going to improve you as a tennis player, and actually it's going to have very negligible impact on your rating. So we're seeing those withdrawal issues. We're then seeing the regional piece that we've got to go and dig into, and then we're hearing a little bit around the rating bands and the 2-point differential and so on and so forth. So, how might we tweak some of the delivery or some of the formats that can accommodate that?
So I suppose what is the interesting thing as an outsider looking in is that TA, who are invested into UTR, it's a partnership, are using it as a rating and a ranking, effectively, which is not being seen anywhere from my information around the world. So why did it come to that conclusion that it would be both?
Well, look, it's a rating. It's a rating tool in the first instance. So it's an indicator of someone's ability. Now, with anything, we've just had a conversation about Carlos Alcaraz. So he's ATP rank number 6 in the world after yesterday. He's now moved up to 3 and he's trending towards number 1. So you can use data in a variety of ways. But again, as I say, we looked at the 12s and the 14s. So 28 of our 32 seeded players for the 12s and 14s nationals were accurately predicted by the UTR. 83% of our matches at the nationals were accurately predicted by the UTR. So the accuracy, as people have said, is not discounted. Then the question is, how do we use this in building a tournament calendar? And I think that's some of what we're going to go and spend some time with our member associations around. Have we put too many? Is there too many events on the calendar? The simplified pathway we spoke to, you play locally. Then you might want to, hey, look, I'm good enough to play, a larger, regional event or championships. Then I might be good enough to qualify for the state championships.
Yep.
Then I get qualified for state squad selections. The rating system is a fairer system than what we saw previously in the rankings. I don't think anybody would disagree with that. I think people at the moment they're just being thrown off by the fact that we've kind of moved the goalpost a little bit, and particularly for those 10s, 12s, 14s on the pathway, they're kind of thinking, what does this mean for me now? But no one's been disadvantaged. We're
going to slip in a break, and we're going to come back and get into the questions that I've got from a lot of our tennis fans, those that involved at the coalface coming up next. All thanks to Hume Tennis and Community Centre. It's a mini Melbourne Park. It's out in Craigieburn. Melbourne's North. Tim and the team do a great job. It's got tennis for everyone, perfect also for coaches, players. If you're actually coming from interstate, very close to Melbourne Airport, you can compete, you can train. There's accommodation around the corner. Find out more at humetennis.com.au. More of Lawrence Robertson next on The First Serve. Welcome back to The First Serve. Great to have your company on this Monday night. Brett Phillips in the chair. Lawrence Robinson is with me in the studio, Tennis Australia Director of Pathways and Game Development. We're going to get to a few questions around UTR. There's just one off the text here, Lawrence, before we get to Andrew. How does a top national 14-year-old have his UTR go up when he has only won 25% of matches since December and lost most of those with uncompetitive sets, is a question that just came in.
Look, Brett, I mean, I can't get into talking about specifics because I haven't had a chance to look at everybody's individual UTR and all their individual results. But I think what I can say to you is, again, I say we've looked at all the data from the 12s and 14s, clay court nationals, and then we look at, let's say the UTR 14s globally. There's some pretty consistent themes that come through from those. So if we look at, just the 12s boys this year, so the top 8 players, they've played an average of 84 matches in the last 12 months. So they're committing to playing. They're committing to competing. They are playing both up and down. So again, this is one of the things that we've heard going around, which is your rating can't go up unless you play up. I can show you, graphs here of the boys and girls that competed at the nationals, and there's a steady line going up. They're playing up. They're playing down. The consistent themes are they're playing regularly, so they're playing at least one competitive match a week, so on average 50 competitive matches in a year.
Yep.
And they're winning on average between 65 to 75% of their matches. So they've got a better win to loss ratio. It's a pretty simple formula. Play often, compete, win more than you lose. You're going to get better, your rating will go up.
Okay, thanks for your text. Andrew in Bathurst has given us a call, 1300 736 736. Andrew, welcome to the show.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for having me.
What do you got for us?
I just got a quick question to Lawrence. I know Lawrence quite well, so just one mention there. You talked about the tournaments over the two key periods in the holiday sections for UTRs. You only mentioned a number of tournaments in Victoria and one or two in Queensland where they were up, but New South Wales, the numbers were drastically low, 50 to 70% lower right across the board. And then also tournaments in Victoria were also folding. Why weren't they addressed in that question?
Hi, Andrew. How you doing? Good to hear from you again. And look, I know this is something that's Andrew's very passionate about, and Bathurst has been a huge supporter of the ranking system for many years. So, look, we're well aware of the challenge that has emerged in New South Wales. That being said, again, it's not a complete car crash. We had Albury. There was 175 entries there. Tweed Heads, 175. And one of the things that the team have done in New South Wales is the introduction of the regional match play series has meant that over sort of February and March, there are events that have counted towards players' ratings, and they had over 1,000 entries, in that duration. But Andrew's right. I mean, there are some events that have had their entries down. There are more events in New South Wales, considerably more events. There are more opportunities to play. So, the choice is with the player now. And to Andrew's point, is like, what are we going to do to address that issue? And that's why I'm flying up tomorrow and have that conversation with Jazz and Darren and the team in New South Wales, because we see how critical players travelling and attending regional events are to the tennis ecosystem in those parts of the world. All I'm saying is that it's not completely desolate. There are people travelling in Queensland to play regionally. People have travelled in Victoria. people have travelled in New South Wales, perhaps not in the same numbers, but we've got to go away and look at that and think, is that how they've built the calendar? Is it how we potentially incentivise players to play other events? So I'm not glossing over it. We're well aware of the issue.
Thank you, Andrew. I'm going to get to a few of these questions, Lawrence, as many as we possibly can. So these are what came in. Any plans to address the drop in juniors playing tournaments and kids paying $65 for 2 matches to win a tournament?
So look, we've spoken to the drop in numbers, and so in terms of entries, so overall, the number of players competing has not dropped. So we've seen the same number of people competing. In terms of the number of entries overall, nationally, they're down about 11%, the actual entries are. But again, what we've seen is there are more opportunities for them to play in other areas. What we're hearing is players don't want to play because they want to protect the rating. And as we've said, that actually is not going to help anybody in the long term. If you want to get better as any tennis player or any sportsman or woman, if you want to get on the court, you're going to get better by playing more. So we can show all of the information to say, get out, compete regularly, and you will see your rating improve if you're winning more matches than you're losing.
Doug says, is Tennis Australia concerned with the lack of entries in doubles? Doubles draws have been decimated with the introduction of UTR. Under the previous ranking system, valuable points were up for grabs in doubles. As doubles results have no impact on your singles UTR rating, tournament numbers have dropped significantly.
Yeah, look, I think that's a fair question, a fair comment as well, and I think the review did say, look, we wanted to look at finding the right balance between tournament play and competition, or what we call pennant play or club competition. So we're hopeful that as people have a choice to play both, they'll get their doubles, experience by playing club or pennant or state league in some of our other states. But yeah, I think we should take a look at how we might incentivise players to continue to play in the doubles in the various tournaments that we're hosting. Okay.
Andrew says, is TA concerned that the banding of UTR grades in tournaments makes moving up and down on the UTR scale difficult?
I don't think that's necessarily the case, but I think we've spoken to this. The moving up and down, this notion that you can only improve your rating by playing players above you, is actually not the case. As I say, the 12's national champion, if I could just, 12's national champion since December, he's played 48 matches. He played 25 matches of opponents who are rated above him, and he played 23 matches of players who are rated below him, and his rating's gone up by nearly 1 point. So he's played a lot of tennis, and that's what we're seeing consistently. Now, do we need to go out and tell that story or get that information into? Absolutely. We've got to do a better job of that. But that's what I'd say is it's compete and win your matches.
From what you said, I probably know the answer here, but is TA considering reverting back to a rankings point system?
Well, certainly not at this stage. We're not looking at reverting back to a rankings point system. As we said before, we had 6,000 players in a ranking system. We've got a rating system now that was always intended to cater for players of all ages and abilities. And whilst the conversation right now is focused on those who are in the ranking system, and particularly those 12s to 16s who are the aspirational players, when you actually go out and start to talk to Clubland, and I was with a number of associations with Tennis Victoria on the weekend, how they're using it to run their midweek comps and Saturday comps and pennant. No longer are they grading and pen and paper and whatever. They can actually make use of this at the grassroots, right? So this was never intended to be just for a small cohort. This was always intended to be for everyone who wants to play competitively. And the vision for us is 5 years down the track, we've got 150, 200,000 people. And you and I can easily say, hey, what's your rating? Well, I'm a 6. Hey, I'm a 6 as well. We're going to have a good match.
Yeah,
that's the long-term vision. We're just going through the let's call it the pain period as we roll this out.
A question in here, I'm going to jump a few, try and get to as many, because we've sort of covered a few of the topics with our questions. What penalties would be imposed to actually stop withdrawals? Example, like 3 retirements and you get a 6-month suspension. That was just a question that sort of came in because we were talking about, obviously, withdrawals, maybe not as many entries at some of these tournaments with people just focused on protecting their UTR.
Yeah. Well, firstly, protecting your rating is not something we'd advocate, and we're hoping many of our coaches are not advocating our kids not playing or anyone not playing. In terms of the withdrawal, so look, there's a process, and this is where sometimes people get frustrated with, the federation. But we are proposing a change that has to go to the board. The board has to approve it. It then flows down through the code of behaviour. But look, we are looking at really two critical changes. One would be if you withdraw prior to an event starting, there's one level of penalty, and if you withdraw during event, and that would be probably a double penalty. And the reason being is the minute you withdraw, one, no respect for anybody on the other side of the net, and you know what happens to the draws after that. It does cause chaos, and that's why we've been having some, challenges with our tournament deliverers.
Let's slip in our last break. We'll come back and round out the questions for Lawrence Robertson in the studio, Melbourne's leading synthetic grass court surface and construction specialist, always on board with us. ASTE Tennis Courts, they're trusted by Melbourne tennis clubs and councils. Check them out, aste.com.au. The first serve racing through a Monday night as always. Need a good tennis lesson. Go and see Shane Scrutton at Yarra Tennis Coaching out there at beautiful Eaglemont, just off the Eastern Freeway. If you're a beginner, if you're a bit more experienced, his mission is simply to improve your game. Over 30 years coaching Shane and his team out there. Beautiful setting. Check out yarratennis.com.au. Lawrence Robinson is in the studio, of course, Director of Pathways and Game Development at Tennis Australia, UTR. We've been discussing that tonight. Obviously, we've spoken about it quite a bit this year. I'm going to get to a few more comments. In fact, I think there's one quickly here. Nick from Ivanhoe on the text. The tournament play, too many matches in one day. 4 matches in one day is not attractive. Tennis is a very long day compared to a game of 3 hours of football. That's just a comment from Nick.
Yeah,
on the text.
Yeah, I'm not sure we can necessarily get away from that. I don't think we're in a situation where we want to see anyone playing 4 matches in one day, and I think we would be looking at ways in which we can limit that. But that's our sport, and it poses definite challenges for us, particularly with our officiating community, which is an area now that I'm responsible for, and they've regularly told us these are long days, and that's also something we want to try and address.
Without the coach's support, the performance participants, parents and players won't get on board. Talk about that coach space. There has been a coach review that's been going on for quite some time. I suppose that the coach's role in all this, in trying to work with the players around this UTR?
Yeah, look, I can't speak to the wider review, and obviously Adam Carey's recently joined the team from Queensland, and like Adam is sort of ready to sort of roll out a number of elements in that regard. We absolutely agree that the coach role, and again it was called out in the review. They're pretty critical in helping the player understand what does it mean to compete and the essence of that. And I think there is definitely concern. I'm not an Aussie, but we always would look from afar at the nation. The notion of Australian competitiveness. They love to compete.
Yep.
We need to be able to work with the coaches to help educate the players and the parents, the players, as to the benefits of the rating system, debunk some of the myths that are out there. But again, fundamentally, how can we get you on the court and get you working on your game and developing your game?
I think you've already said this a few times, that this is a comment that came in. TA need to educate the performance community on what effects UTR in development years has on their realistic destination. So I suppose people are probably just crying out for a little bit more discussion and feedback and how it's all going to be implemented long term. A couple more on the text. One from Michelle. My 11-year-old and 13-year-old partner had to play 2 16-year-olds in a recent country comp thanks to UTR. It was a straight sets drubbing. So just the difference in ages.
Yeah, look, we've heard a bit of this. And look, the rating system, once you get to around about 14, you start to see a bit of separation. And so, we think at the under 14 space, the rating can drive, good level-based play as part of the, as a sort of, let's say, a genderless competitive opportunity. Beyond that, look, in an ideal world, we don't necessarily want to see 25-year-olds playing 16-year-olds. However, I will say that many of the greats that came up through the ranking system, or the old system, not the ranking system, but came up through the system, they played club tennis. And when they were good enough, they were playing Division 1. They were thrown in, whether they were 12, 13, 14. Many of them played that. So we've had many years where that's how they developed their game. They learned their court craft, as you say, by playing, players who are a bit older. But, we don't necessarily want to see that sort of, time and time again.
I've got plenty more, but we're going to run out of time, as we always do on this show. What I'm going to do, I might handball some of that correspondence
Absolutely.
onto you, and
Absolutely.
you can digest that and pick it apart. And I think it's an ongoing discussion. We've got a long year. It's only May. We go right through to November. I think we continue to revisit it, keep the conversation going. Plenty of people passionate about tennis, not only the governing body, people out there at the coalface of the game. I think we all have one aim, and that's to see tennis thriving in this country. How we get to that destination, well, we need everyone to come together and collaborate. So there's plenty to do in that space.
Absolutely. Brett, thanks again for the opportunity. Much appreciated.
Thanks, Lawrence. Lawrence Robertson, of course, Director of Pathways and Game Development. Keep an eye on our website, thefirstserve.com.au, all our dedicated podcasts, as well as our Monday night show. We've got Aussies Only, Crunching the Numbers, Play USA. What are you doing here with Rowan Williams? The Grind is coming up soon. We'll talk to you next Monday. Hit them beautifully, out of the middle of the strings if you don't mind, and we'll do it again next Monday.